Hi, and welcome to Business as Usual. Today we'll be looking at running Brook Vineyard.
My name is Manuel Moraes. I'm the vineyard manager for Running Brook and Cole Warner. And I planted this here 6 years ago, what you see here. And we also have one in Westport, a few acres there.
My name is Pat. I work here every day at the winery from 12 to 5, do the tastings, other events that we might like to have here, bridal showers and parties, and it's a great place to work. Everybody wants to know how I got this job and how they can get it from me.
My name is Pedro El Texera. I'm a full-time dentist, and I'm one of the co-owners of Running Brook Vineyard and Winery. My duties here is to make sure that the wines don't go bad, since I have a lot to lose if things don't go the right way. So I'm not an official winemaker, but I enjoy it, and this is what I do here at Running Brook, is basically take care of the wines, and I like to know what's going on in the vineyard, because sooner or later Manny is going to retire, and I'm probably going to have all the responsibilities here at Running Brook. But I'm very lucky here at Running Brook because I have a good team. I have Pat here in the tasting room. She helps me with the computer, the newsletter, the website, and there's some guys that work out in the vineyard too that are very good and do most of the vineyard work, because I don't have time to do everything, but I like to sort of know what's going on.
Well, I was brought up with this stuff. My father had a small vineyard and winery back in the old country. So I was brought up with it, and I've always enjoyed it since I was little. As a matter of fact, I don't remember learning it. It came quite natural with me as I was growing up. So I've been around this stuff all my life.
I'm Portuguese. I'm from the island of St. George, the Azores. I came to the United States. I was 2 years old, and I lived in California. And I moved back to Portugal when I was in my younger years, and I lived there for 7 years. Finished my high school, and I wanted to be a dentist, so I came back to the United States and decided that I wanted to live in the United States. So I go back to Portugal every year. But I have a son and a daughter. My son is in Vanderbilt Medical School, and my daughter is in Providence College studying biology. And I don't want to go back and forth like my parents did with me. I've resided in Rhode Island for about 25 years. The reason I got into this is I'm from a farming background. My father works with dairy cattle, and his father was a cheesemaker back in the Azores. And I was brought up in California. I lived out there 16 years, and I used to work in a dairy farm on weekends and go to college during the week. But the dairy farms there have thousands of cows. And there's the largest dairy farm, I think it's in Idaho, has 68,000 dairy cows. And it's a person from actually the Azores is the owner. And you have to be there every day for the cows, because it gets cold, and you have to feed them and milk them always at the same time. And I don't have the luxury to go into dairy farming, and it's a bad idea on the East Coast. But a patient of mine, which is my partner now, Manny Moraes, suggested that he grows grapes, the Native American grapes, the Concords and the Niagaras, and he sells them to home winemakers. And we made a trip out to Long Island, actually a couple times, and I tasted some really nice wines, and it got me excited that we can grow wine grapes in the Northeast. And so, life is too short. You want to do as much as you can with the years that you are here. So I decided I wanted to try and make wines. And in the beginning, there was a lot of questions. We didn't know which grapes we could plant, if they were going to survive the winter, if they were going to ripen properly to be made into wine. And we've been doing this for about almost 14 years. And we've had, I think, mostly successes and some failures. And I think, pretty excited about the wines that we're producing here.
Where the vineyard is located, there are microclimates around. And I think I selected perhaps the best microclimates in this area to grow grapes, because we are farther from the ocean than most other vineyards. And you get more heat here because you're not that close to the ocean, and you have less fog in the summer because you're not that close. And this is almost borderline. If you go another 10 miles north, it's almost impossible to grow. But this is an ideal field here in Westport to grow grapes.
We are in a cold climate, so it's a short growing season. In California, for example, bud break, when they start growing, is usually in the beginning of March. Bud break here is about a couple months after that, usually in the beginning of May. Also, the winters are a factor. Some varieties die out in the wintertime, so you can't just plant any variety here. So you need grapevines that are winter hardy. You need grapevines that don't need a lot of heat to ripen, and it's usually measured in degree days. Different varieties have different amounts of degree days to ripen. So, so the white grapes would be the easiest ones to grow here. And we grow basically Chardonnay and Pinot Gris as well, and Vidal Blanc. And with a Chardonnay, we're able to make 3 different Chardonnays. We make a Chardonnay that people like. That's a unoaked Chardonnay, meaning it's fermented in the stainless steel tanks behind me or in the stainless steel barrels, and this one has no contact with oak. We also make a Pinot Gris similar to the unoaked Chardonnay, also just no barrel fermentation, just strictly out of the stainless steel tank or the steel barrel. There's a factor or something in the winemaking called MLF, meaning malolactic fermentation. With the unoaked Chardonnay and the Pinot Gris, we usually don't allow malolactic fermentation to happen. And it's very critical, the temperatures at which the wine is fermenting, the grapes are fermenting. And after you ferment the grapes, you have to rack them, move them from one tank to another tank. You have to filter the wines and make sure that you remove the yeast in the malolactic fermentation before it goes into the bottle. So we have the unoaked Chardonnay and the Pinot Gris. We also make a Vidal Blanc that's very, very popular. It's a grape that does very well in this region. You get good tonnage. You get maybe 6-7 tons per acre. The Pinot Gris and the Chardonnay, you get only maybe about 3 tons, 3.5 tons per acre. If you have too many grapes per acre, the grapes don't ripen properly. So the Vidal Blanc is a good producer. It's a grape that has a very thick skin, so you can allow it to stay on the vine until November. And when the leaves drop with the first frost, the water content in the berry evaporates, and you get very delicious wine. And it's very consistent. Every year we have really nice Vidal Blancs. And they're different depending on the growing season.
These are Vidal Blancs, these here. Up that way is Pinot Gris and Chardonnay. This particular area is a great area especially to grow whites. I think you can make some of the best white wines in the country right in this region here because of the climate. The grapes are ideal because of they get enough sugar and enough acid to balance it, so you can make great whites.
We're also have experimented, and I think pretty positively, with the Cabernet Franc and the Merlot. And Pinot Noir is a very tricky wine to make. They call it the finicky grape. The skins are very thin, the berries are very tight in cluster, so if it rains during harvest, they burst at the skin, and you can get off flavors in your wines. But we've experimented with the Pinot Noir. When it's a good year, we do a Pinot Noir. When it's not, we do a white Pinot Noir, which is very good. We also have dessert wines. We have a frost wine made from the Vidal Blanc.
The frost wine is you pick it very late, in the middle of November. You wait as long as possible, so they ripen as much as possible. And you pick them, you know, after the first or second frost. And then you freeze them. Then you make the ice wine. It's a lot of work to it. It's a very expensive wine to make because you don't get any production out of the, because about 80% of the berry or 90% is frozen. So the only thing that doesn't freeze is where the sugar content is. And they go into the press completely like a block of ice. And then you keep pressing until some of the juice comes out, and that's it. And you make ice wine with it. So because of they froze, the taste is concentrated. Because where the sugar content is, all the flavors get concentrated. Because all the water is frozen in a berry. And that's how you make ice wine.
And we do, we're starting to make some ports. And we call our port a Ruby, the red one, and the white port is called Viva Vidal, because the European community since 2005 doesn't allow a port made outside of Europe to be called a port.
We pick the grapes around the middle of October, and then from November to December there's not much to do, and then in January we start pruning, because you have to start pruning early because there's a lot of pruning. So we start in January, and it's never an end to it until we pick the grapes in October again. When it's picking time, we have volunteers and stuff. People seem to enjoy this type of thing, and a bunch of people come because it's quite a bit of work to pick all these grapes. We have the stemmer outside of the building, and we just stem all the grapes, and then it's pumped into the tanks inside, and then goes through the fermentation process, and then the winemaker takes it, from there on. But actually, the hardest part, the wine is made in a vineyard. If you have good grapes with a decent winemaker, you make good wine.
The making of the wines, in a general description, white wines are made different than red wines. Red wines might be a little easier to make. A lot of people make wines at home. They buy California grapes, and you have a barrel, and you destem and crush, meaning you pluck the berries off of the cluster, and you crush them, and you allow fermentation to happen. Usually natural yeast, which is present in the skin of the grapes. In a commercial winery, you need to be pretty sure that fermentation is going to be healthy. You're not going to get any off tastes or flavors. So you inoculate with yeast, and when you inoculate with yeast, you have to supply yeast food, and you have to be concerned about the temperature and the rate in which fermentation takes place. When fermentation is almost completed, it's usually the skins where the color exists and the flavors. After fermentation is almost complete in the skins, and you press the juice out of the skins into the barrels, and you allow them to complete fermentation in the barrel. And you may have to move them from one barrel to the other barrel a couple times. That's called racking. And usually red wines, you want to wait at least a couple years before you release them to the public. After a year and a half of aging in the barrel, then you can go ahead and let it bottle age for a few months, then release them at least 2 years after making them. The white wines, for example, the Chardonnay, which is most of our white grapes are Chardonnay, we have a press in the back. It's a bladder press. It's hydraulic. There's like a bladder that squeezes the grapes. We do a whole cluster press, so we don't pluck the berries off of the stems. We just squeeze them, and you get a juice that's very fruity. It's called a free run, and that's pumped into the tanks, into these tanks behind me, for example, and you let them settle out for a day or two, and then you move it to another tank, and you initiate fermentation by adding yeast again, and again controlling the temperature. You want to ferment maybe close to 2 weeks. And it doesn't look like wine until after a few months, because it's very milky, very cloudy in color. And by lowering the temperatures after fermentation, you get the wine to start settling. And you just let nature work its course. Great wines, usually the least you do to the wine, the better usually is the wine. You don't want to have to do a lot to a wine, but you got to make sure that it stays in the right path to a good wine that you're trying to, to make. And what can happen if the fermentation is sick, you can start getting like a rotten egg or rubbery smell. That's usually in hydrogen sulfide, and that's why you have to rack. You have to move the wine from one tank to the next, and to those volatile gases escape. You also have to keep, of course, the tanks and anything that comes in contact with the wine. Sanitation is the first rule of winemaking. Keep things clean, not sterile but clean, and that's basically how you make white wine. And the white wine is nice because you can bottle it a few months after you start making it. So a wine made last year in November, you can probably bottle it in May or June of the following year and start releasing it to the public. Yeah, and there's something called bottle shock. I don't know if you're aware of that, but if you add any sulfites to wine, because if you look at a bottle of wine, it says contains sulfites, and by law, you can't have more than, I think it's 350 parts per million. We have very little sulfites in our wines, usually less than 100 total sulfite. But that's how you preserve the wine or not allow it to become vinegar, which is a bad thing to happen to your wine. So you got to keep the tanks full, because if the tanks are not full, then you get air in the wine. It's not the air, but it's the oxygen in the air that oxidizes the wine. The red wines become brownish in color. The white wines also have like a brown color to them, and they have a nutty flavor, like an almond nutty flavor. That's oxidation, and that's something that's not good if you're making, for example, a Chardonnay or a Pinot Gris or a Vidal. If you're making Madeira, type wine, then you want it to oxidize, because that's what Madeira wine is. It's oxidized wine. We're a small operation, and it's amazing how far you can get one step at a time. And the first few years when we started in Westport, we have 13 acres of vines in Westport, and I worked with Manny, and I learned from him. It looked like a lot of things to do, but when you do 1 row a day or 2 rows a day, after 2 or 3 months, you look back and a lot of work is accomplished. So you just do a little bit at a time at a steady pace. It's like the race between the rabbit and the turtle. Steady, and you can get a lot of work done that way. And the machines, we have a bottling line right over here at the side. So it's a state-of-the-art bottling line. We can bottle a tank like this, that you need 10 tons of grapes to fill up this tank, and you get about 7,500 bottles of wine, 625 cases. When the filter and everything is working properly in the machine, we can do this in 6 hours. If it was by hand, it would take days. So the equipment helps a lot too, and those hoses hanging over there off the wall, that's how you move the wine from one tank to the next. And the forklift with the racks with the barrels, you can move things around very easily, and the cases of wine are placed in the pallets. And so when we do things, we always think, is there a better way of doing it? Can we get more done with less effort? And the first couple of years, you're not really sure the timing and how to do things, but we've repeated, growing grapes, making wine, and aging wine, and moving wine around several years now. So we're starting to get like a system.
And it is a lot of work to grow grapes. It's one of the hardest things to grow in a farm business, because they're very susceptible to diseases, and you gotta spray often, and you gotta keep an eye on it all the time. They gotta be healthy to produce a good grape. There's nothing out there that is as finicky as grapevines in this particular climate here. But as you see, it looks pretty good, and it's gonna look better and better as they progress. This here, all these wires will be covered when the canopy is full ground, will be above these wires here. Then everything is trimmed, you know what I mean? So they don't cover to the middle of the row. They grow at least half an inch a day, at least. A little later, maybe an inch a day. Depends on the temperature. The hotter it gets, the faster they grow.
Right now, we're producing maybe between 2,000 to 3,000 cases a year. The plan is to produce about 10,000 cases a year. Maybe in a few years we'll be up to about 10,000 cases, but right now 2 to 3, depending on the year. Our wines are different than other wineries in this region is because our wines are 100% grapes grown by us. So you're tasting southeastern New England. That's what's special. Because this is a microclimate, like Manny explained to you. We're at an excellent location, having to do with the elevation and the distance from the ocean and body of water and a lot of different reasons. This is a microclimate, and we have a very good location for growing grapes here. We kid around and we call this the Napa Valley of the East.
I think what's really important is that the two owners want everybody to leave here happy. And that's reflected in people coming back all the time and coming to our events. And that's our mission, is to make people happy and make good wines at the same time.
Well, if they want to reach me, it's 335 Old Fall River Road, Running Brook Vineyards and Winery. That would be the best place to meet me, because I'm always here.
We have a webpage, runningbrookWine.com, and our email address is info@runningbrookWine.com. And we have Pat here answering the phone and answering our emails and sending a newsletter out. And when we have people come in for tastings or we're at an event, we have a book that we take people's email addresses to keep them informed of any small event that we may have here or the releases of new wines. It's an easy way to keep in contact. And we also have a wine club that we just started. So, and we're always looking for new things to add to our experience here.